Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about leadership, presentation skills, innovation, and how to navigate the world. Before I get to our very interesting guest today, I'd like to invite you to see where your presentation skills are strong and where you might need a little support by taking our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your presentation skills are strong and where perhaps a little bit of support could help you get the results that you need and the recognition that you deserve. My guest today is Tonya J. Long, who is one of the people I go to when I have a big idea and I want to bounce it off of somebody who's really smart and who will give me great feedback. So I've been trying to get her on the podcast for quite some time. And now she's written a book and it's great. It's easy to read. It's very clear. It's a wonderful book. And so I said, come on the podcast so we can talk about it. The official bio is Tonya J. Long is a leading voice in digital transformation and artificial intelligence integration and governance. She's a veteran executive and fractional chief AI officer. Her leadership is informed by 2 decades of experience steering multinational teams for billion-dollar technology companies in a range of industry verticals. She's spearheaded over 20 corporate merger and acquisition integrations. She's a company founder in the talent management space, and she's a sought-after advisor on private boards. With a graduate degree in public policy from the University of Tennessee and a diverse portfolio of leadership roles, Tonya's unique breadth has established her as an essential authority in complex discussions on AI policy and government. Her debut literary work is called AI and the New Oz, which is a guide to embracing AI the way it's showing up for us now, set in the framework of the Wizard of Oz. She's an interesting person. She's brilliant, and I know you will enjoy the conversation. On to the interview with Tonya Long. Tonya Long, my friend, I am so happy I finally got you onto Speakers Who Get Results. Welcome.
It is wonderful to be here. It has taken too long.
It has taken too long. Well, as I said in the intro, you are one of the people I go to when I have questions I want to sort of figure out and bounce ideas off of. So I just love being able to do that. Before we get into the list of questions I have for you, who would be your dream interview? If you could interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
The list is long, but given that I know today's topic is AI focused, AI centric, and what's happening in the world with disruption around AI, I'd have to go back to Nikola Tesla.
Okay.
Brilliant,
eccentric. Tell us who he was for those of us that are a little bit who think about cars first.
He was an enigma. So he was a fitting name, of course, for the electric car. But he moved to the U.S. from Europe. I can't remember.
Yugoslavia.
Yugoslavia. It was quite the brilliant man. I think he received 4 honorary degrees. but he was one of the creators of electricity.
Ah,
He had a penchant for blowing up things. He created actual earthquakes in
oh,
the city of New York. We're talking back turn of the century with his desire to capture power in the form
so
of
from the
electricity.
19th to the 20th century, the experiments he did in the early
Yes,
20th century.
yes.
Okay,
So
got it.
clearly, much like AI, people were enamored with him. If you think about New York, turn of the century,
Mhm.
people were enamored with him and they were terrified of what he was creating.
Ah,
And
okay.
right. And so I see so many parallels in what he was building was going to be so life changing for
Mhm.
society. He knew it. The people around him understood and knew it, yet there was so much fear around what that could mean, around the damage that it could potentially cause. He did cause physical explosions, so those
Mhm.
caused physical damage to buildings,
Mhm.
and so people were, at the time rightfully concerned. And I see the parallels to today, and so I would ask him, what he would do differently, what he would, having the wisdom of having gone through that cycle of decades of trying to get attention to his projects and
Mhm.
get acceptance of the very forward thinking progressive things he was trying to do. How would he engage differently with society? Because he was very much, I would say, a cowboy. um,
Uh-huh.
Part of this was the era of the time.
Mhm.
Communications were different, humans were different. But where I think, is trending to be a very collaborative, cooperative, businesses working
Mhm.
together march into the future. My reading of that time was that things were very much individualized. He and Thomas Edison apparently were at war with
Uh-huh.
AC current versus DC current. And I can't
Yes.
imagine that being a war, but it was, because I'm right, no, I'm right. And
Yes.
so, what would
Ego is always part of the story.
absolutely. And they were battling for mental brainiac supremacy.
Uh-huh.
And he was quite the brainiac and
Uh-huh.
built amazing things. And it had to be so lonely to be building something that everyone was afraid of.
Ah.
Right.
Oh, what an interesting point.
Yeah.
Very interesting thought. Okay, that brings me to
Yeah.
the first question I had for you, which is, why is artificial intelligence, as we now know it,
Mhm.
or as we now perceive it, different from the technological changes that we've been pushing for the last 20 years?
Yeah.
Or is it different?
I think it's very different. And not quite as bad as when we implemented and institutionalized electricity,
Hmm.
but, and it took the building out of power lines and infrastructure. But I think infrastructure is, what makes generative AI in particular so very different. In my book, AI and the New Oz, I talk about speed, access, and scale,
Hmm.
because in my history in tech, I've implemented large systems, and we took months, sometimes even years, to plan these large rollouts. We spent millions of dollars with big four, advisory firms, just to do the planning for the implementation. We bought massive infrastructure to carry information,
Hmm.
across countries. And then on November 30th, we released ChatGPT to the world, and people implemented it on their phones. And
Right.
so that's what's different is, your ninth grader probably installed it and downloaded it before you did, depending
Yeah.
on your
Depending on your generation, right?
depending on your
Yes.
and not even, yeah, I hate to make it about generation, because I know a ton of people in their 60s who are on fire with this
Uh-huh.
technology. But depending on your ilk, you may have waited, but access to this, it still is free
Hmm.
if you want it to be. So
And there,
access,
yeah.
scale, speed. I was carrying it around in my back pocket, nearly immediately. So those things make this technology, particularly generative AI, uh,
Uh-huh.
very very different from technologies of our past.
It makes me think about way back when Isaac Asimov wrote science fiction stories where people had a computer on their wrist. And so now there's the Apple Watch. Exactly. Exactly. And I cannot actually, because of fibromyalgia, I can't actually wear a wrist device like that. But I look at it and I say, okay, cool. I have to settle for this big, old, clunky phone. Who knew? As Isaac Asimov knew 50 years ago, but still, very, very cool. And indeed, your 13-year-old probably your 11-year-old probably downloaded it before you did. So, you've written this wonderful book. I loved it. It says AI and the New Oz, and it's so readable. It's so clear for people who do not live in the tech space 24/7. I love the way it's so easy to read. What made you decide to use the Wizard of Oz as a metaphor? And actually, before I even ask that, for our international listeners, you've probably heard about the Wizard of Oz. That's where Judy Garland sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But I know lots of people who've heard about it but never watched it. I would recommend watching the movie. It is a classic, and you can get it in whatever language you're in. It will watch the movie before you read the book, and then read the book, because it will make a difference. Every American grows up on this book, but it's not necessarily, not everybody else does. What made you decide to use the Wizard of Oz as a metaphor?
I was a story looking for a vehicle. Okay. I had not been using generative AI all that long when I quickly understood we have some challenges. And those challenges were in my peer group, executives kind of, pushing it away, not wanting to use it. And I think those were ego reasons. They didn't want to be overstepped by their ninth grader or their junior level employees. And I also saw the potential for, I spoke earlier about the big four advisory firms, millions of dollars spent. And I think we've conditioned knowledge workers to wait for the strategy people to come in and give them their plan. And I see this as, and I saw quickly that this is a totally different time. And I didn't want people to wait. I wanted people to feel empowered now, to start using AI now, to own their processes, to really use all the different permutations of AI enabled products that are coming out. Some earlier, I think it's slowed down a little in a good way, but there were 600 products a week being introduced for AI technologies that people were putting out for free that you could use for personal productivity, for use with your teams. It was mind blowing what was coming through. And I thought, if everyone's waiting, then no one's moving forward. And I need to get to those less technical people or those people who think that they're too high up to be bothered with it, to get them to understand, no, we are all doing this now because we're not waiting for the infrastructure to be built. So I knew
you needed a metaphor that was going to be easy.
I decided to write a book. I wanted to do something easy. And I was prowling in my jewelry box for something to wear. And I ran across an old pen that my late mother had given me that was ruby red slippers. It was a brooch. It was a cheap brooch.
Yeah.
And I saw it and I thought about it. And that sparked the idea. And the clincher was,
Dorothy's ruby slippers.
Ruby slippers. For anyone who's not familiar with the story, you click your heels, make your wish, and it happens. And it's what the witch chased her for those ruby slippers. And it's a central theme of the storyline. But I saw that pen gave me the idea, but then it captured when I sat down at this computer. And I asked ChatGPT, I said, if I were to write a book on leaders and less technical people embracing generative AI into their lives with the theme of the Wizard of Oz, what would the chapters look like?
Mhm.
And ChatGPT rolled out 8 or 9 chapter names, and it was the framework for the book. And it was for me, it was a winner. I wrote the book in about 90 days. People are a little overwhelmed by that, but when you have the right structure, everything just flows. So my mama gave me the idea, and ChatGPT sealed the deal because the structure was there, and I was like, this all makes sense. And as you've said, it's relatable. It was something I believed in, that I could write
Mhm.
around, because I do believe that the adoption of AI is right now, the successful adoption is not a technology issue. It's a human centered, people first effort that we
Mhm.
need to get people comfortable, welcome, and really engaged in owning their own processes and confident in changing their processes. The technology is kind of the easy piece,
Mhm.
and it's the people piece we need to focus on. And that requires, I think, an elevated form of the leadership we already know about. There's really nothing in this book that's groundbreaking. It's reminding people of the inherent gifts that we all have, and to use those to bring everyone forward.
So you talk about ChatGPT as a writing partner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So does anybody ever say, so did ChatGPT write the book for you?
I've had a couple, but they've never said it again.
Okay. So what do
And
you
I
say?
think, yeah, go ahead.
No. What do you, because I have, so I have professional writers in my family,
Mhm.
and and I think about I think about the writers in Hollywood who are
Right.
worried about losing their job through ChatGPT, and certainly
Yes.
writers have always been low on the rung in Hollywood.
Mhm. Yeah.
What do you say to someone who says, well, ChatGPT wrote the book for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People keep saying they wrote a book, writing a book a day.
Those people aren't helping.
Okay.
And the thing is, you can use ChatGPT and just turn it loose and say, write me a book, and the results will show that, I believe.
Okay.
ChatGPT was never intended to be creative or intuitive enough to be the decision maker to write an entire body of work. What you put into Chat GPT is what you get out. So although it can be done, and we see in the media people who have said, I'm churning out a book a day, and selling it for 99 cents a pop or whatever. I think anyone who looks at this book as a
Mhm.
reflection of me sees my mark on it. It
It's your
sees
voice.
my absolutely my voice, which was the hardest part of writing with a partner,
Hmm.
a digital partner. But they also see my stories. They see my history.
Hmm.
I had lunch with a friend from work yesterday, and he said it was like sitting talking with you to read it,
Ah.
because I could hear you in when you would break into the stories of you. And that's something that ChatGPT can't do, is it can't be me. I can teach, and I trained ChatGPT on my writing style,
Hmm.
but you have to still inform ChatGPT about the sequencing and what you want from it. And
Hmm.
and then you have to still weave together. And I think it takes human intuition
Hmm.
to create a storyline that hangs together and that is compelling. If anything, what I do when encountered with people who are, they're always just, messing with me, they're joking when they say, Chat GPT must have written your book. That was, how about that? And what I try to turn that conversation toward is the evolution that we're moving to with that human machine connection, where I want everybody to get there,
Hmm.
because ChatGPT did offer me, my brain is only so big,
Hmm.
and ChatGPT's reach introduced things to me that I may have had way back here, but didn't pull forward, or I may not have ever heard of. but it offered me a broader story. It offered me more intellect than I would have had. And I think it was the relationship between AI and human, when we can start to see it as a partnership instead of, oh, the human was lazy and the machine did it for them. When we see that it took the human asking the right questions, and then the machine kept feeding it stuff until the human was satisfied with, I'll take number 2, 12, and 48 of the responses that came through, because I finally got things that worked with what I wanted to pull together.
And things that also sparked your creativity to say,
Absolutely.
oh, yes, I could use that as a seed to take off from.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it is, I think, it took me longer, I've told people, to write the book with ChatGPT, but it's a better body of work because of ChatGPT, not just from there's the reach of the stories, and there is the quality of writing, because quite obviously I'm long-winded. And so to be able to put things into ChatGPT and say, can you tighten this up? And it really, I mean, on many occasions, what it gave me was so helpful for a better writing experience.
So back to the book and embracing AI for us. So you did write it. ChatGPT was a research assistant for you. For those who haven't read the book yet, and it's a quick read and it's really fun. What do each of the characters represent? Can you give us the framework that you're working through?
Yeah. It's essentially the cast of The Wizard of Oz. So, we start with, the heroine of the whole story, Dorothy, and how Dorothy pulled together this unlikely team. So we talk about, teamwork and nurturing a team with unlikely skill sets. And her being able to have her having a vision for how those team members contributed. So Dorothy with teamwork, and I won't do this in order, but everyone that has seen this remembers the lion who didn't think that he was brave, but he had courage when he had a reason to have courage with this team of protect. The Tin Man who wanted a heart. I particularly love some of the stories embedded with the story of the Tin Man, but leading with love is a personal mantra for me. So the Tin Man and empathy and heart, the Scarecrow and wisdom and knowledge, because I believe there is a big component in AI adaptation and adoption with creating learning cultures and embracing that and giving people platforms to learn from. So, the Scarecrow thought he needed a brain to be smart, but he already had plenty of smarts. He just needed someone to believe in him. So, so the Scarecrow, that's the main cast that you think of, Dorothy and her 3 compadres. But then beyond that, the wizard, I thought, was a huge piece of the overall story of Oz, because the wizard, he had this wonderful vision for Oz, and he loved Oz deeply, and he saw the future and the utopian society of Oz, and that's where we're headed with AI. So I thought that was a great fit. Then 2 unlikely characters that were a lot of fun to write. One was the Munchkins as a set of characters, and then I folded in with them the flying monkeys. The Munchkins are collaboration, because they got things done through knowing how to collaborate to manage forward. And then in a very related way, but a little more sinister, those flying monkeys could network the heck out of things to acquire what they needed to move things forward. So I folded the flying monkeys in with the Munchkins. And then the last was the Wicked Witch of
the West, right?
The Wicked Witch of the West and Resistance.
She's the one who says no.
She might have become my favorite, because people see the evil characters as selfish or trying to take over the world or trying to cause harm. And the more I studied her through this process, I reflected on her as needing to be heard,
Uh-huh.
and I was trying to fit her into my box of humanity and AI and fear, but thinking about resistance, I felt bad for the Wicked Witch of the West,
Mhm.
but that chapter on resistance, I think, is a particularly important chapter for all of us.
So tell us a little bit more about resistance and dealing with resistance. This
Mm-hmm.
sounds like basic change management, right?
Yeah, no.
No, it's more than that.
Well, I said just now that it's important for all of us because you've got clear resistance, like the Wicked Witch of the West, who's trying to, kill Dorothy to get the red slippers. That's a little extreme. So we've all got those extremes in our lives.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I wrote about is reflecting on our own resistance, our own
Okay.
resistance to ideas, our need to stay curious. I think sometimes the smarter we get, the wiser we get, the older and more experienced we get, we think we know the answers.
Hmm.
That is in itself a very small form of resistance because we're like, no, 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 we've done that. No, we've tried
Yeah.
that. Not invented here. And that is resistance that gets in the way of moving forward better. You're about to say something.
I was going to say, please tell me more. So how do we cope with it? How do we deal with it? How do we either embrace it or work against it? Because indeed, the one thing every organization has in common is people, and people tend to resist change.
Right.
So some more than others, but yeah. So if you're facing, let me ask it two ways. If you feel resistance inside yourself towards using AI, how can we negotiate with the witch so that we learn to embrace AI?
Takes an awful lot of self-awareness. But
Okay.
I think when you're negotiating with yourself, you're already a step ahead when you realize that you're resisting,
Mm-hmm.
and you pause to ask, why am I delaying, hesitating, resisting? Why am I? And that puts you so far ahead to be able to ask yourself the question, what am I afraid of? Am I afraid of being embarrassed? Am I afraid of, because when you really peel it back, not many of us are really afraid of Skynet. Not many of us are really afraid of Cyclops climbing up the side of the building and taking over. But what are you afraid of? And you can work through that however serves you best. If it serves you best to hire a private tutor because your ego just can't be embarrassed in front of a group when you don't know an answer, then do that. Take a Coursera course or a Udemy course. There's a million answers, but it starts with knowing what your blockage is. And then the answers become much more easy once you understand what's causing the fear. And then I would apply the same thing out, because I think that's your next question. When it's an organizational thing, it's you've got to hear those people. You've got to listen to organizationally what are the concerns. The easiest one to understand right now in the workforce is job loss or job deceleration. And it's easy to understand that leaders have been conditioned to have all the answers. And I think right now we just need to listen first, to let people articulate their worries so that we can really build programs around their worries. I've got all kinds of answers to the job loss thing, but until I've made people feel heard and they know that I've been able to capture their concerns and then build through that, And so that's my recommendation, is that leaders do a lot of listening right now. And you can't just listen and it be empty and you not do anything for months. You've got to respond with some level of clarity about what the plan is. And it's time now for organizations to be building blueprints of what we're going to do to upskill and retrain. And jobs are going to change. I don't think we need to, spread lollipops and sunshine around that commits that nothing will change, because I believe that would be grossly unfair. But to encourage people that as things will change, we're going to prepare this team, and to encourage people that we're going to have fun with it. We're going to do some interesting things. People will get to grow.
You have a great story in the book about comparing this to the fears around the invention of QuickBooks, the accounting software.
Yes.
I loved that story. Can you tell us that?
I want to give credit to Jamie Peebles. Jamie is a thought leader on LinkedIn. So that's how I know Jamie. It's his story that I have borrowed with his permission. It's in the book, and I tell it a lot because it's a great story. When QuickBooks was invented, very easy to understand, everybody said, there goes the world for all the local CPAs and the local bookkeepers. They'll have no job. And this was 20 years ago? I mean, QuickBooks has been around forever.
Right.
And instead, without a lot of fanfare, without a lot of organization around it, like is happening with AI, almost organically, CPAs and accountants and bookkeepers started to build services around QuickBooks. So whether it's configuring and implementing QuickBooks, which I think is hysterical, right? Because they're leveraging this new technology that's becoming ubiquitous with running a small business, whether it's implementing it or instead of like doing the general ledger entries, now they're elevated, and instead the accountants and CPAs are doing more forecasting and planning and higher level activities. So there's just as many CPAs and bookkeepers out there, but they're doing higher value add programmatic activities for these small businesses. And it's such a win, in my opinion, because the businesses are closer to their financial business because they're right there on top of it. It's right there with them. They're not waiting for the monthly or quarterly report from the CPA, and the CPA is doing a higher order thinking strategic activity. I think it's a beautiful story.
I love that idea. So what comes next? We'll put it in context. We get to the Emerald City. Maybe Dorothy flies away, but everybody else stays behind. Dorothy and the wizard flies away. Dorothy clicks her heels together and goes back to Kansas. What's next?
Writing a book's kind of like having a child.
Okay.
When you're pregnant, you say, I'm never doing this again.
Okay.
and then when the baby comes, you start planning the next one. There is a plan now for a second book. I need to get it labeled something around Wizards of the New Oz. Inspiring stories, successful stories. But I want to find, because when I was writing this in March, April, and May, there weren't many stories out in the public domain about leaders who were implementing AI.
Okay.
But I think now there will be. And I want to highlight those leaders who are using these traits, either people, teams, or organizations, and bring those stories forward. Because I think if the first book motivated people that you have wisdom and heart and vision and courage, then the second book says, and this is how other people in the real world used it, implementing AI. This is how they put rubber to the road to move their thing forward. And I
what
think
what we're learning as we adopt this technology and
yes,
develop it and continue working on with it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I think, and also to spotlight those companies, because they deserve those early adopters who are working through, who are seeing the Wicked Witch and getting her off her broom and having her join them. I think those people deserve to be highlighted and their stories told so that other people can see companies that have a great culture and to get their own ideas for we could do that too.
What do you say to the people that this is our own natural human reaction to say, I just want to go back to the tried and true. I want to stick with the system I know. What do you say as you're thinking?
I'm trying to think about how to say it.
How to say it in a polite way. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll be a very hard choice to make, to be honest. I could go all the way back. I wrote a couple of months ago about when the typewriter was introduced and what a big brouhaha that was, because it was just inflammatory for some people to receive things that were pecked out on a typewriter from their local business people, from to get a bill from the dentist where they had typed out their invoice. I don't see how we can go back to those days. And I would just encourage people to look at how the technology fits you. Not everyone can be at the front of the adoption curve. I'm not asking for that. But I am asking for people to consider it before they resist it. There's a lot of effort in resisting. And frankly, I'm going to go ahead and say there's a lot of effort in the people who care trying to bring along the people who resist it. And it keeps us from focusing on the next when we're constantly working to embrace and love and show deference to hearing the heart of the people who are worried. So if there's anything, I would encourage people to consider the future, to consider what benefits them, and try to find the spot, be it ever so small, that brings them value. Because I would submit to you, it is impossible to not find a spot where it benefits your life.
Very, very interesting. Tonya Long, this has been so much fun. I'm definitely going to bring you back on to comment as we see how this all develops. And we've had AI around for a while. It's just been in the last few months that it has exploded. And I should say that we're recording this in August of 2023. So, dear listener, if you're listening to this later and you're saying, what's the big idea? Where everybody uses AI. Remember, this is how we were feeling in the summer of 2023. I'm definitely going to have you come back and hear some of the stories of how people are using this technology and why embracing it rather than being afraid of it is a positive choice and a profitable choice, I would say.
Excellent point.
Thank you so much. Actually, I usually ask people what's the first thing to do, but really the first thing to do if you're listening to this is buy the book. I'll put the link in the show notes. And it's so readable. It's so clear. It makes so much sense. Buy the book. And that's really the first place to start. And then start following Tonya Long on LinkedIn and all the things that she's writing about. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this conversation, please tell your friends, share the episode, subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe to us, whatever podcast app you're listening from, and especially leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts, because that's the one that counts and helps more people find us. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.